Okay, well, anyways, for March 23rd, 2020, we are here. I'm Georgia Purdom. This is Roger Patterson, Bodie Hodge. And as you can see, we are maintaining, yes,
we can't even high five. I mean,
6-foot distance here as much as we possibly can. And so I know, I'm sure this is just a time of real, unknown for a lot of people. It's true for us here at the ministry. But we're doing the best that we can, and we're trusting the Lord. That's one thing I thought that we have that sadly a lot of people don't. We have hope in the Lord, and we can hope in those things, and we want to be able to share that with people. I was thinking yesterday as we were watching our church live stream, I'm like, think about how many sermons are being live streamed. Think about how much the gospel is being preached on the internet more than ever before. I mean, how cool is that, right? I mean, if that's what it takes to bring this, bring people to the gospel, bring people to Jesus Christ, that's worth it.
Hey, I do want to have people, praying for a lot of the smaller churches that are out in the middle of nowhere. Some of these guys, they don't have even much of a website,
or the equipment to be able to record and broadcast.
Correct.
Those
so,
things.
be praying for a lot of those guys. I'm sure a lot of them are struggling out there. I come from the middle of nowhere, so I'm used to seeing that sort of thing. So, yeah, this is weird. I keep having to turn around to talk to you.
You can just ignore me back here and I'll pipe in whenever I want to.
Well, I'm going to start off with, I know a lot of you are getting on, so that's great. So leave your comments and questions. I'm going to start off with some cool pictures, which hopefully the kiddos are watching who sent these in. So these are pictures of kids that are mimicking what Ken did on Saturday with the bread dough in a bag. Okay, so this is how to make bread. Because if you go to the store, right, you can't find it very often. So we're going to have to go back to the old days and figure out how to make it. So so these are some kids that sent their pictures in showing us their lovely loaves of bread. So it looks really good.
Yeah, so you start with seeds, and then you, maybe not that far back.
That's a lot more work than I think most people are doing. Our family makes a lot of bread already, so it's not too big of a shock for us, but it still is.
Yeah. It's great, and so I'm sure it looks delicious. I love the smell of it. Like, that's what I like the best. That's the best part of it. So anyway, so great. Lots of you are on. So we'll start with our first article. It's kind of a fun article, and we need that today. Maryland Distillery switches from liquor to hand sanitizer. So as many of you know, in hand sanitizer, there is a lot of alcohol. And so this particular distillery decided, hey, why don't we help people out? Because hand sanitizer is hard to get right now, but yet we need it. And so they switched to making hand sanitizer.
Yeah, and if for a business trying to be innovative in these times, we know there are lots of small businesses like this local distillery who are going to be struggling in these different difficult times. And here's an innovative way to take a product that you already have. They have lots of alcohol, ethanol on hand, and so they've combined that with some other ingredients, came up with this recipe. It was approved for distribution, and now we've got hand sanitizer available for people in this community.
Yeah, a lot of hand sanitizers out of stock if you go look for it. So, it's kind of a hot commodity right now. I just don't drink the hand sanitizer in case people are wondering.
Bad idea.
Bad idea.
Yeah, and just a reminder too that even though, I understand needing to use hand sanitizer sometimes, especially in the healthcare industry, it is always best to wash your hands.
Always.
Okay? Because of the soap and the mechanical action that occurs when you wash your hand, that is always really the best way to do it. If you can at all, don't default to the hand sanitizer, default to washing your hands. Right?
We discussed that a little bit last week in one of the live science videos we did with the kids.
Good.
So if you want to go and watch that on Ken's Facebook page, some more information there about spreading germs and how hand washing helps that.
That's right. Take showers too.
All this, maintain proper hygiene even though you're at home.
Brush your teeth, come on.
And let's keep this going even after the virus is gone.
That's a good idea. I'm surprised somebody hasn't thought of that.
All right, so we got lots of people on here. See, I got Wyoming, Roger.
Hey, Wyoming.
So
I saw Northern Indiana and Massachusetts. And
good.
So yeah,
All
New
right.
York.
Trudeau government introduced this bill to criminalize therapy for those with unwanted LGBT identity. All right, so what this has to do with is a bill that's been introduced that basically says that if you coerce someone, and this is applicable to minors mainly. That's the main thing that this is focusing on is minors, so children in the home, and that you cannot coerce them to undergo therapy, basically to convert from a homosexual lifestyle to a heterosexual lifestyle, is what this is saying.
Now they can do it the other way around, though.
Yeah, that was very clear in the article.
Yeah.
You were not allowed to convince someone to move from a homosexual or transsexual or whatever lifestyle heterosexual, but you could the opposite direction. So it's
So it's a double standard,
It's a double
really what it
standard,
is,
very
yeah.
clearly.
Well, it is, because we talk about gender fluidity. So what if this person decides if they're born a boy, but then they want to become a girl, but then they want to go back to being boy, you're stopping
illegal
them
all
from
of a
doing
sudden.
that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just not, it's not consistent, at least.
Yeah, you
so.
can't encourage them.
And this brings real criminal penalties to
Right.
this, not just some
Like
minor
years in prison.
sanctions, but up to
Right.
5 years of prison for anybody involved in persuading a minor in any way and coercion with the adults. And this is a case where, as the church, and we're giving true biblical counsel, we need to call sin, sin. It almost seems like that you can't pass out a Bible because 1 Corinthians 6 is still in the Bible.
opposes it,
You
yeah.
can't give that to a teenager who's dealing
Right.
with these issues, or you might be guilty of that. So anyone offering biblical counsel is going to run up against these sanctions. And this is a case where we clearly, as Christians, have to obey God rather than man, because we're not allowed to soft pedal sin and set those things aside. We need to call those people to truth and repentance in the way they were created in God's image.
Yeah, they're trying to force a religion here. That's what they're doing. They're trying to legislate a religion. They're trying to force secular humanism, particularly sexual humanism, onto the culture. And it shocks me to see that sort of thing. But, right before we got up here, we were actually chatting about this article ahead of time. And if you look carefully, they're saying, okay, yeah, a child can go from one sex to another sex, but you can't encourage them to come back out of that to what their original sex was. Well, hold it. That actually destroys gender fluidity.
It does.
So they may not realize it, but unwittingly, they're saying that gender is not fluid anymore. You can go one direction, but you can't go the other.
Right. And they're making a very broad definition of what conversion therapy is. So to include like any type of, basically it would include any type of pastoral counseling, biblical counseling, anything like that. Because there are certain forms of conversion therapy or reparative therapy that are very problematic, and we would not agree with those.
Could be damaging and harmful. We would never condone those types of things.
Right, but they're broadening the definition and making it very vague almost as to what all this, I mean, it literally could be applied to the Bible. So I was thinking, like, even if you sell the Bible, because it says you can't profit from it for convincing people to do conversion therapy. So even selling the Bible under that law would seem to be prohibited and seem to be wrong. I mean, I don't know if people realize that, but I don't know what other conclusion you can come to.
I don't know, maybe Christians can hop on a Mayflower and sail somewhere else. And
I think we're out of places to go.
they said a lot of this stuff is actually coming from Dr. Christopher Wells, a Canadian research chair for the public understanding of sexual and gender minority youth at MacEwan University in Edmonton, Alberta. He's the one really behind a lot of this sort of thing. If you actually look closely at what he does, he posts a lot of sexually explicit content on social media, and he also promotes curriculum and material that promote a wide range of sexual acts and experimentation for minors. So he's actually encouraging minors to get involved in all sorts of strange sexuality. And, it shocks me to see that sort of thing.
And they said, what this article says is the ultimate goal, or it said one of the people they quoted says the ultimate goal is to silence the Christian church in Canada.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. It's
Yeah, that's
about
what Wells
not
wants to do.
allowing Christians to help people that truly need it.
Wells also shared a cartoon comparing Christians to Nazis. Now, how odd is that? It was Christians really that were largely fighting against the Nazis. Christianity and Nazism are two diametrically opposed religions. Nazism, for example, is pro-evolutionary, where you start with the Bible, you have creation, that sort of thing. So it's got two entirely different views of people. Dr. Jerry Bergman actually wrote a book. We sell this here at the ministry. It's called Hitler and the Nazi Darwinian Worldview. If you want a better understanding of what was going on, this is a powerful book to get a better understanding of what was going on, particularly at that time.
Yeah, if they're truly going to be consistent from a naturalistic evolutionary worldview, that's really what Hitler was trying to do. He was trying to bring those things into population dynamics.
I've said this before. Hitler was one of the most consistent Darwinists there was.
Yeah.
As sad as that is to say.
And I think people don't understand that. They don't realize that. And if you truly believe that these people are superior and these people are not, then why not kill off the people that aren't?
Especially when Darwin said that's probably what's going to happen. He actually encouraged that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, Hitler has a couple of books. He had Mein Kampf, his famous biography, and then he has his second book. It's simply called Hitler's second book. But you read those, and he was a diehard evolutionist wanting to do what Darwin said. So.
Looking at the comments here, it says, I'm glad you guys are here to encourage and comfort us during this time. Well, we're glad and happy to be able to do that. Love from Italy. So Eliana from Italy, hello. I know they're really,
Struggling
really
there.
confined over there more so than we are here right
Yeah.
now. And so we're glad to be able to do this, to come into your homes. I love technology for this very reason. So
Yeah.
we're glad to do
You know,
that.
a lot of people over in Europe, they still have access to the UK's bookstore. And I
Oh,
know
yeah.
we have a special, we'll tell you about our special here in a little bit, of 20% off with a little code Matthew 6. We'll tell that a little bit later. But apparently they're doing that over in the UK as well. So,
Great.
you know, people in Europe and places, if they're really wanting to get some books and resources, feel free to utilize the UK's bookstore and take that 20% off.
Yeah.
That really
That's
helps
awesome.
shipping and stuff. So.
Good. All right, next article. No, the Supreme Court should not allow discrimination against Christians in the name of neutrality. So the article is really focusing on the case in Philadelphia that's happening right now with Christian and even Catholic adoption agencies that don't want to place children in the homes of homosexual couples. And so they're basically these organizations are saying, no, we want the ability to exercise our freedom of religion, which because we believe this is sin and wrong, we don't want to place children in those homes. And so what the article is focusing on, it's saying that, you know, we need to realize how people are starting to view the freedom of religion. Basically, it's something that Christians are weaponizing and using it to say that people should be able to exercise their religion, and so that's what the article is basically talking about. Is saying, you know, the government's trying to say, well, no, we've got to be neutral.
Well, there is no such thing as neutrality. I mean, Jesus said, you're for me or you're against me. You gather, you scatter. There is no neutrality in this. And that's actually the pretended neutrality fallacy is what that's called. So when somebody comes up and says they're neutral, you need to realize they're not. That's one of the first things we need to recognize right off the bat. People are not neutral. We're not neutral, but we're upfront with that. We stand on the authority of God and His Word from the first to the last verse, and you know, we're happy to do that. But at the same time, when somebody comes up and they say, well, you can't use the Bible, you can't exercise your religion, that sort of thing, and they try to do that in the name of neutrality, they're trying to trick you.
Yeah, so the article quotes here, the city claims, City of Philadelphia, the city claims that its law requiring adoption agencies to place children with same-sex couples is religiously neutral and generally applicable, and therefore permitted under the Smith decision that's referred to, which had to do with the use of peyote in religious rituals and similar types of things. So they're looking at the effects of how these laws are impacting these adoption agencies, religious adoption agencies, claiming that it's neutral. But if indeed the Christian religion believes, as the Bible clearly teaches, that a family should be a man and a woman with children, then we have a conflict there, and there's no way to be neutral on those types of issues. And this is where the myth of neutrality just runs into the liberal worldview and blows it up, because as you try to be neutral on everything, something's got to bring some conflict. And here's an example of that. We need a standard of truth, a standard of righteousness, and of course we trust that that's what God has revealed to us in His Word and in the person and work of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
You know, one of the examples they use in here, they said by this reasoning, Congress could not pass a law specifically requiring Jews to eat pork, but it could pass laws requiring everyone to eat pork, so long as it was motivated by some neutral public justification.
Right.
I mean, think about that. What's going on right now with coronavirus and all that sort of thing? Imagine if food starts to run short and they pass a law, everybody has to eat pork.
Yeah.
I mean, what would Muslims do or Jews do that say, well, that goes against my religion? Well, it's a neutral
And that's
law.
the problem. Like the way it's set up right now is instead of the government having to justify itself, the religion has to justify itself. And that's what they're saying is really the problem that we're in right now because of some earlier decisions that were made. That shouldn't be the case. It should be that the government has to justify itself because we have freedom of religion.
And ironically, I bet that in the Philadelphia school systems, they're promoting Hindu yoga, they're promoting Buddhist
Buddhism.
meditation, those types of things. And so they're not neutral to those claims of religion. They're willing to promote those things. And again, that's just a demonstration of how the liberal view collides with itself.
Yeah, I guarantee secular humanism is taught left and right in the curriculum.
Absolutely.
Evolution, Big Bang, millions of years. They're all in there. And what's happening is we're seeing the government elevate themselves to supersede what God says. And that becomes a problem.
Yeah. All right, alien life and almost certainty, expert says. So once again, here we go, right? With supposedly someone saying that they think that life could be common in the universe because life's building blocks like nucleotides and amino acids that make up RNA and proteins and things like that can spontaneously form throughout the universe. All right, fine. Those things can form. No one doubts that because, you know, we've seen these things. But that doesn't mean you have life, right? Just because you have some
You're not even
nucleotides
close.
or amino acids, you just can't randomly assemble them and get life, right? There has
Absolutely.
to be an information giver, so to speak, for information to exist. And it's a lot more than just a couple spontaneous nucleotides.
Yeah, and I added my little subtitle here, as I like to do, even though there's no data. So alien life and almost certainty, expert says, even though there's no data. And as we look at this, they claim that we can have current estimates suggest that the magic number of 40 to 100 nucleotides, here they're talking about an RNA basis for
Okay.
information.
That's not even close to life, though, is it?
No, it's not. Should not have been possible in the volume of space. So they're looking at the Big Bang as the basis of their thinking. They're thinking about the formation of stars and the nebula hypothesis over time for formation of planets and all those things. So it's evolutionary assumption upon assumption upon assumption that's driving their interpretations. And we see interesting phrases here like it's practically inevitable, almost certainty, it's a plausible way, it's an exciting thought, and they might be able to uncover the origins. All of this is based on absolutely no data.
Yeah. Well, I love the title. I love some of those things you pulled out there because they're oxymoronic. When they say alien life and almost certainty, well, if it's almost certainty, then it's not certainty. You know, I mean,
not.
they're
It's
going
uncertainty.
against each other. But, you know, other things that you see in here, you know, they're talking about abiogenesis. Basically, life comes from non-life just randomly through chemicals and so forth. Do you realize that actually violates the law of biogenesis?
Right.
So here they are promoting this idea that goes against everything we've ever seen from scientific experimentation regarding the origin of life. And on top of that, they just believe it.
And what they're trying to do is lower the bar for
Yeah.
what they call
yeah.
life. That's happening
Because-
in current origin of life
As we were talking
studies.
beforehand, you know, it talks about like 40 to 100 nucleotides needed for life to exist. But when we look at organisms today that can reproduce, that can sustain themselves, so to speak, and some bacteria they do have small genomes, they do have a small amount of DNA, but it's a lot more than 40 to 100 nucleotides.
And they also have proteins and
Yeah.
phospholipid layers and all types of different
Yeah.
things associated with that.
Yeah.
So they're
it's
lowering
just-
the bar and lowering the bar.
Right.
Makes you wonder, sooner or later, they're going to get down. You know, we're going to define a rock as life. Look, we found life out.
Yeah.
Well, where there's water, there must be life.
Yeah,
right,
that's the other
Bobby?
thing
Well,
they
yeah, we
talk
see that a
about,
lot.
you know. But water, again, does not equal life. It just equals the possibility of life, and so not life itself.
Well, look what it says here. Very first line. NASA is committed to finding life in the universe. You know, I'm all for research out into space and, you know, let's do some tests and things like that. But if they're going to focus billions and billions of dollars just trying to look for life, you know, I think that money could have been a little bit better spent on medical supplies. That probably would have been
Yeah.
important right about now. You know, I mean, I'm all for some of that stuff, but at the same time, I think they got the priorities wrong.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
we know
I
lots of
agree.
technologies have come out of the space industry and those
Right.
types of things. But yeah, there's
Priorities.
where could we spend those things better than on the discipline with no data?
The title of this next article, as soon as I saw it, I was like, we have to do this for Answers News. Ancient shell shows days were half an hour shorter 70 million years ago.
I am shell-shocked.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Okay.
They got
sorry.
one in. That's good.
Incorrigible.
But I just look at this and I think we cannot even predict the weather for tomorrow, but yet we know a day 70 million years ago was a half an hour shorter than it is right now.
By looking at a mollusk.
Yeah, so they
Yeah.
found these fossils
Right.
of this bivalve mollusk. It's not quite like anything we have alive today.
And they say that too.
Yeah.
They say
So-
there's nothing like it living today.
Nope. So they look at the shell structure and they used a laser to drill little holes. And again, the assumptions are just everywhere in this article. They're starting out by saying, we know this was a fossil formed 70 million years ago. And
Assumption.
it throws in the 4.5 billion year history of the Earth, Moon, dance, all of those things. So we've got these data points by looking at the layers that a mollusk builds up in its shell. And they're saying they can now examine these fossil shells to give us fractions of a day and tell you how long a day was because they're getting a daily cycle
Because
inside the
again,
shell.
they're assuming that a mollusk that's not known to exist today, that they really don't know anything about, laid down its rings daily.
Right, and they don't know that.
But how do you know that?
Because there's nothing like it living today, so they're assuming the very thing they're trying to prove, which is affirming the consequent fallacy.
Yeah, I just kept reading as I kept going through the article. I'm like, nope, that's an assumption. That's an assumption. That's an assumption.
And they're building an assumption on an assumption on an assumption.
And here's the kicker. The new study analyzed a single individual that lived for over 9 years in a shallow seabed in the tropics. And they're hoping to be able to take this. And so if we have one from 70 million years ago, and we can find one from 90, and we can find one from 200, and we can scale this out, interestingly enough, they're trying to understand how this relates to the dance that the Earth and the Moon are doing. Hey, that's another thing we covered on Live Science the other day.
And you know what? All that's based on the assumption that there were slow, gradual changes throughout the fossil record.
Absolutely.
Yet the majority of these
Right.
things were laid down in the flood of Noah's day the same year.
And you're not getting, I mean, anytime in science, replication is really important. So it's not just, I mean, you look at one thing and make all of a sudden, you know that 70 million years ago, the day was 23 and a half hours instead of 24. I mean, that's a huge
Huge leap in logic,
so
yeah.
to speak, in logic. And you know, what Roger was alluding to or talking about was they're talking about the Earth and the distance that the Moon is from the Earth. And they have trouble with uniformitarian assumption understanding its distance from the Earth right now, because if they go back in time and they take the rate it is now, it can't be as old as what they know it is.
Yeah,
so
as
to
the
speak.
Moon is slowly receding
Right.
away from the Earth, that means 1.5 billion years ago, it should have been touching the Earth,
Right.
which is well inside the Roche limit where it would start to
Oh,
break
right,
up the
right.
Earth. And
Yeah.
But they need 4.5 billion years.
Yeah.
So where are they going to get those extra 3
Right.
billion
So
years?
they already have time markers in their secular worldview there. They're just trying to find some data that fits in it.
Sure, they've started with with that data.
Now,
of
now here's
4.5
all we know.
billion
We
years.
know those are growth rings. What we
Right.
don't know is when those growth rings stopped and finished. It wasn't
Yeah.
like every day, oh,
Was
let's
it every
start a
day?
new
Was
one
it
every
more
day.
than once a day?
You know,
Was it-
there's a lot of assumptions behind that, and then they draw conclusions based on some of those faulty assumptions. That's actually contrary to the fact conditional error fallacy. So we're seeing fallacy after fallacy in this. And, you know, this happens a lot when we look at fossils and, you know, a lot of these things you dig out of the rocks, of course. But there are books that deal with some of the fossils. Dr. Jerry Bergman, he also wrote another book here. He's a prolific writer, actually. He wrote a book called Fossil Forensic, Separating Fact from Fantasy in Paleontology. And this is a really good book to look at a lot of different aspects of fossils, some of the interpretation behind it. And so, you know, I want to encourage people to consider that one. We also have a book, this is from Kevin Anderson, a good friend of ours, Echoes of the Jurassic, where, you know, they're actually specifically looking at dinosaur soft tissue and a lot of those issues. And because a lot of people are misinterpreting that as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, when it comes to these kind of things, if you have a proper worldview, you have a better possibility of interpreting this stuff correctly. But when you have a secular worldview, you can go all over the place.
Yep. We have someone joining us from Alaska. They said they're sorry for getting on late, but it's been so crazy. Well, we understand that.
We get that.
We totally understand that. But again, these are archived on the YouTube channel and everything. So if you do happen to miss one, it's on the Answers in Genesis YouTube channel. All right. Abortions continue as Massachusetts hospitals forbid non-essential procedures. So this, like when I read this article, it just kind of blows my mind. So basically, all elective surgeries are supposed to be stopped, but abortions are allowed because abortions are considered essential.
Now, wait a
Yeah,
minute.
this is in Ohio as well. There was a news item on that run around this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of mixed by state on what's being allowed here.
Right, but
I-
most
I've
of
got a
them.
little skin in this game because at the end of January I had a major gallbladder infection and attack,
Right.
and I
Those
was
are not
scheduled
fun.
to have my gallbladder out last Friday.
He wasn't supposed to be here today.
I wasn't supposed to be here today. I walked in and Bodie said, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah.
But my elective surgery to remove my gallbladder, which is
Right.
clearly problematic. I'm on a altered diet and having to be very careful of those
Right.
things. So I'm putting myself at risk by not having this
Right.
surgery. I'm glad to do that if it frees up a bed for someone who needs it in
Right.
this virus issue. But we can still have an abortion. That's
Right.
blows my mind.
It frustrates me to see that sort of thing.
And the things that they
Poor
say,
children.
okay, so here's the thing. They say, well, the problem is now people are going to be out of work, and so they're going to have, they're going to be poor, and so they're not going to be able to get abortions. I'm like, good. Honestly, I don't want people to be out of work. I don't want people to be poor. But if it stops them from having an abortion, then that's a good thing. And they talk about, money being taken away from reproductive, what they call health programs, and
Abortion
decreasing
care
access, which is
yeah.
abortion, which is just a fancy name for abortion. Good. If it takes money away from those things, I say good. If it saves the lives of thousands of children in the womb, then good.
And what are you saying to poor people when you say, if you're poor, you're going to grow up poor, you're better off dead?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really sad, the
is.
implications of some of that worldview. It's interesting, with the whole coronavirus thing, we're supposed to say 6 feet apart from each other. How are people even getting pregnant in the first place?
No, this is a family show, Bodie.
It doesn't apply to your family, so. But
Right.
as I just read this, I thought it shows you how cheap life is in the womb. What they consider, how they are looking at this and how they are talking about this. It's just so sad to think about that. But
Yeah, abortion is modern day child sacrifice, and it dwarfs the people who are dying from things like coronavirus or the flu or whatever it might be, and it breaks my heart to see that. Now I know there's probably been a lot of people out there who have had an abortion or might be suffering the loss of a child in such fashion, but just know that there is forgiveness through the blood of Jesus Christ. And I know that's a big deal right now. I know a lot of people are suffering, but even a lot of people like this, it can carry with them for a long time. Sometimes I have suicidal thoughts and so forth, but I want them to understand you can always turn to Christ.
Yep. There, you can. All right, so this next article is kind of related. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is on the Supreme Court, obviously falsely claims abortion is safer than childbirth. So this is one of those arguments that gets around the idea that abortion is safer than a woman going into a hospital, say, and having a children. And what this article actually quotes from a lot is a brief that was actually submitted. And it has to do with this case that's going on in Louisiana right now, which is basically saying that if a doctor is going to be doing abortions, that he has to have privileges at the local hospital, because in case something would go wrong, it would be easier than to transport the woman to the hospital and take care of this. And so anyways, that's the court. That's what's in front of the Supreme Court right now. But in the brief that was submitted by the American Center for Law and Justice, the American Academy of Medical Ethics, and the American College of Pediatricians said, look, abortions are way more dangerous than childbirth, over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So she needs to read the briefs that are being
It
submitted.
definitely is for the child.
Well,
Absolutely.
definitely, yeah.
And it just goes along with the tropes that are mentioned here in the article. It's not a baby, it's just a clump of cells. Thousands of women died before Roe v. Wade from back alley abortions. Abortion is health care. All of these types of things, they're not true. And when we hear people making claims like this, we need to stop and think about what their source is. How do they know?
Yeah.
Are they an authority on this issue? What's the source of their knowledge? How do they look at the world around them? And we know that she has an anti-life worldview, and it's no surprise that she would be parroting those
no
things.
neutrality. Once again, we see that.
Yeah, definitely. And, it talks about statistics in the article, and, stats will say whatever you want them to. Depends on what and that's one of the things they bring out is sometimes, for example, abortion deaths are also counted as pregnancy deaths. So it totally depends on how you're talking about why the woman died and all of those things is how they count it. And so that's why it can be totally off. So that's what we have to be careful anytime we see statistics is look into that a little bit more and figure out how they're actually coming up with those numbers.
Yeah, in the brief here it says, yet ambulances are not an uncommon sight at abortion facilities.
Yeah.
So that's very common. The brief also documented about 72 instances of women being taken by ambulance from abortion businesses in 2019 alone.
Right.
And that number could be much higher.
Right.
Because
Those
the
are
whole
just
reason,
the reported ones.
those were the
Right.
ones where, you happen to have some pro-lifers outside, trying to encourage people to keep their children instead of killing them. And, they were able to document this. So there's probably a lot more where there weren't. There just
We've got
happened
a
to be no
testimony
witnesses.
here from Becky on the Facebook page. She says, I grew up dirt poor. My childhood was so happy because I had a family that loved me. And that's what we want to see. And if you're facing that issue and you're afraid of that, adoption is always another great option.
Absolutely.
And there are lots of resources out there, care centers who would love to help you get through those hard times, even if it means that adoption, giving up that child.
And we're going to be opening a fearfully and wonderfully made exhibit soon, hopefully, once we reopen. And, it's really exciting to see that exhibit. We got kind of a sneak preview of it the last week, and it's just really amazing to see the design and complexity of a human being in the womb and its development.
It is
and
pretty
that
neat.
It is fully human, and it is, valuable, and it is made in the image of God. And so I think that's going to be, I hope, a real eye-opener for people to really understand this issue more from a scientific as well as a biblical standpoint. Well, we are about out of time, but I want
Yeah.
to share just a couple things at the end here, if I can get to them. There we go. So our Facebook Live programs every day at 10 o'clock, Roger is going to be doing a cool science experiment. At noon, we have our speaker. I was just doing that earlier today. At 3 o'clock, we have animal encounters, and today is a mystery animal, is what they told me. So I don't know what it is, so it's a mystery animal. And then at 7 o'clock, it's kind of a behind-the-scenes thing. So Ken will be talking with one of our AV people about the special effects theater, so the 4D theater and our Genesis film that we have there. Also, 20% off, as Bodie mentioned earlier, anything that's basically in the store, except if it's already discounted, and just use the promo code Matthew 6 for that, and that's also valid in the UK.
In the UK, yep.
So take advantage of that. You're home. These are great resources that you can have at a discounted price. And, if you can, help us out. I know this is a challenging time, but it's challenging for us as a ministry too. And we really want to be able to sustain everything that we're doing here, sustain our employees, and our ministry. And so you can do that by going to answersingenesis.org/give and give either a one-time payment or a monthly payment. Either is appreciated, just to help us continue to offer these kind of programs and everything else.
And you
that
can
we
give
do
more
here.
than this, by the way. I mean, these are just some of the basic numbers, but
Right.
we would really like to be able to take care of our staff during this rough
Right.
time. It
Yeah.
is tough, and so please be praying for us as
And
well.
we're going to keep bringing you these programs as long as
Long
we
as we
can.
can.
We know how important it is to remain engaged and not get drawn in by all the negative things.
Right.
Bring you hope here and encouragement and some biblical truth.
Yeah.
So we'll
But,
sign off for today, and we'll see you back on Answers News next Monday.
All right. God bless you all.